Discover the incredible and touching secrets of Greek myths. 10 transformative stories exposed. Emily stood in front of her classroom, the walls adorned with faded motivational posters, her heart heavy with frustration. The buzz of voices faded as she thought of the creativity that lay buried beneath layers of standardized tests and rigid curricula. What could she do to awaken the love of learning? She was painfully aware that her students were slipping away, their enthusiasm dulled by the relentless grind of assessments. Each day, they shuffled into the room, heads bowed, homework half completed, minds clearly elsewhere. What if I could bring them back? She wondered. Maybe she could show them the power of stories, just like her grandfather had once done for her. Yet the fear loomed. How would the administration react? Would this dream be worth the risk? As whispers of discontent began to spread among her colleagues, Emily felt that pinch of unease tighten. Ideas for innovative lessons that danced in her mind were met with cold stares or quiet chuckles. Every time she tried to push against the limits, her heart raced with self-doubt. What if her efforts to inspire resulted in backfire? It felt as though she was holding a spark in an assembly line of conformity, ready to ignite change but terrified of the consequences. Her chest tightened at the thought of parental complaints and government standards that suffocated creativity. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Returning to her thoughts, Emily's mind swirled. The weight of decisions pressed against her as memories flooded back her grandfather's storytelling sessions. The way his voice spun tales of heroes and monsters that captured her imagination. She could picture him sitting in his well-worn armchair, eyes twinkling as he breathed life into every character. Why was it so difficult to translate that magic into her classroom? She felt an urge to open the dusty old bookstore she inherited from him, the one she had only visited in her childhood. That hidden treasure might hold the key to unlocking something new in her students. With bills piling up, selling it seemed the easy answer, a way to tie off an emotional burden. But deep down, she detected the echo of her grandfather's spirit, urging her to fight for that legacy. But what if it failed? The school board had already expressed their unwillingness to entertain out-of-date myths. A murmur of anxiety rose as she recalled overhearing a parent call her a danger to their child's future. The thought stung, igniting a spark of rebellion. She needed to make them understand the stories were not a threat but a guiding light. Emily caught herself pacing in the empty hallway as tension tightened in her chest. The stakes felt insurmountable, the age-old battle between tradition and innovation looming larger than ever. She needed anything to push back. Each student in her mind became a hero on their own journey. If only they could see it, perhaps they could thrive beyond the pages filled with standardized formulas. Staring at the unopened copy of the Odyssey on her cluttered desk, she grappled with the pressures of her reality. Each flip of the page beckoned with promise, whispering reassurances of heroes who had faced trials far greater than hers. Would she echo their determination or let her fears dictate her path? The thought of relinquishing her grandfather's legacy felt like looming despair. Yet, would she stay true to herself, risking everything for her students and their futures, or would she surrender to the fear that threatened to swallow her whole? The stories intertwined with her being. The choice was heavy, a storm just waiting to break. Emily stared at the unopened copy of the Odyssey, feeling the weight of her grandfather's legacy pressing down on her. Invigorated by a flicker of resolve, she took a deep breath and opened the book, the musky smell of paper igniting memories of her childhood. She could imagine the laughter, the suspense, the sheer adventure woven into every tale. It was time to reclaim that passion not just for herself, but for the students who strolled into her classroom with their dreams already dimmed by standardized testing. As she read, it hit her. These stories were not just ancient myths. They were powerful lessons in courage, loss, and triumph. Each character faced overwhelming odds, yet they persevered. They became heroes through their struggles, something she desperately wanted her students to understand. But how could she bridge the gap? With schools clinging to a curriculum that stifled creativity, she felt an urgency to pioneer a change not just in teaching methods but in the very atmosphere of her classroom. Determined, Emily dedicated her evenings to crafting a lesson plan, merging storytelling with her curriculum, hoping to infuse her students with the same fervor she had experienced as a child. She envisioned thematic weeks where students could explore their own heroes' journeys, write their own myths, and present stories before the class. But the specter of administrative disapproval loomed large. How was she supposed to spark their enthusiasm when every step felt like walking on eggshells? The next day, while seated in the faculty lounge, she overheard a conversation that made her stomach churn. A group of teachers criticized another educator who had attempted an innovative approach to learning, dismissing it as frivolous. "We aren't here to entertain. We're here to educate," one voice said, leeching the energy from the room. Subconsciously, she drew back, afraid of the gaze fixed upon her after she had mentioned her intentions to breathe new life into the ancient tales. In that moment, Emily was rocked between a desire for acceptance and her need to instigate change. After another long day, she sank into her chair, staring out the window as the sun dipped below the horizon. Shadows invaded the classroom, and within them, her fears took shape. Parental complaints, disinterested students, and disapproval from her peers. What if she was destined to fail? But amid these voices of doubt, the essence of her grandfather's teachings throbbed fiercely: courage, passion, resilience. Fueled by this internal battle, Emily resolved to take a stand. She recalled a pivotal quote from the Odyssey: "Courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it." Instead of withdrawing from her dreams, she would confront them boldly. The next day, she set up a meeting with the principal, outlining her ideas for a pilot program that integrated storytelling into the curriculum. It was a risk, but it was one she was willing to take. The principal listened attentively, but Emily knew skepticism colored his expression. As he leaned back, mulling over her proposal, the room echoed with a tense silence. Did she just set herself up for failure? The air crackled with anticipation, and Emily's heart raced as she waited for his response. Would she become the pioneer who revived the joy of learning, or would the weight of tradition crush her dreams? In that moment, she recognized the real test had only begun. Facing the unknown, Emily braced herself for the inevitable challenges ahead, aware that she had taken a step into uncertain waters. As the principal began to speak, she felt the ground shift beneath her. This was only the beginning of a journey that would redefine not just her career, but her very identity. The principal leaned forward, fingers steepled in front of him, studying Emily with a penetrating gaze. "Your enthusiasm is commendable," he said slowly, "but you must understand that our curriculum is designed to meet specific learning outcomes, often dictated by state standards." As his words washed over her, Emily's stomach twisted. There it was, the familiar wall of bureaucracy she feared but had hoped to navigate. Yet, instead of letting her determination wane, it fueled her resolve. She needed to counteract the skepticism, to illuminate the why behind her plans. But what if we're not just preparing students for tests? What if we're equipping them with the ability to think critically and engage with literature on a deeper level? She implored, her voice steady despite the flutter of anxiety within. The principal paused, an imperceptible shift in his expression. She could almost see the gears turning in his mind, fighting against the contours of traditional education norms. Emily could sense the critical moment approaching, the pivotal decision resting between convention and innovation. Taking a deep breath, she continued, "Greek myths teach timeless lessons about humanity. They foster creativity, inspire empathy, and cultivate critical thinking. How can we deny our students access to these narratives, to problems that require them to think beyond the black and white confines of their standardized tests?" The principal contemplated her words, and time seemed to stretch thick around her. He finally nodded, albeit reluctantly. "I appreciate your passion. Let us review your proposal further." If you can provide a detailed outline of how this can be integrated without compromising our objectives, I'll consider a pilot. Yes, she thought. This small glimmer of hope ignited a fire within her, sparking visions of thriving students bringing their own stories to the forefront. It wouldn't just be her vision. It would become their journey, too. With newfound energy, she dove into the task, turning her ideas into accessible lessons. She sketched out thematic weeks: heroism, love and betrayal, and transformation. Each unit would not only explore myths but also encourage students to create their own narratives mirroring the lessons gleaned from classic tales. She pored over stories, guiding students to see their lives reflected in the trials of Persephone, Odysseus, and others, transforming classroom dynamics. But as she ventured deeper into her planning, her mind couldn't escape the specter of dissent lingering in the faculty lounge. Challenges were inevitable, and Emily braced herself for the confrontation that loomed ahead. Would her peers understand her intentions, or would they perceive her as a threat to their comfortable status quo? The day came when she shared her proposal in a department meeting. The room fell silent, tension crackling like static electricity. Emily felt her pulse quicken as she squared her shoulders, ready to face the questions and criticisms. "Emily, aren't you worried this is too much? We have guidelines we must follow," one teacher challenged, her tone combative. "SNT education at its core, about sparking curiosity, engaging students," Emily replied, finding conviction in her voice. "What we need is a way to reignite that spark, not dim it further." As they deliberated, she realized this was more than a discussion about curriculum. It was a direct confrontation with her own self-doubt and fears of inadequacy. Each question posed was a reflection of her inner turmoil, casting shadows on the confidence she was trying to cultivate. Emily's heart thudded loudly in her chest as she anticipated the responses. It was clear. The time had come to face not just the scrutiny of her colleagues but her own uncertainty. She had risen to challenge the very fabric of their established norms. Would she walk away validated, or would she face the relentless tide of criticism? In the tumult of doubt, she also recognized a crucial truth: real change came not from silence, but from stepping into the arena, heart bared and words ready. As the discussion intensified, Emily felt that familiar pulse of excitement and dread blend within her. But this time she wasn't backing down. Whatever the outcome, she would face it boldly, knowing that even if she faltered, she was already rewriting her own narrative. Emily stood at the podium, the whiteboard behind her filled with colorful diagrams of her proposed curriculum woven into vibrant narratives from Greek mythology. She could see skepticism etched across some faces, guarded eyes darting between her presentation and the department head. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, but she resolved to speak authentically, regardless of the uninviting tones directed at her. "Let us consider Achilles," she began, her voice cutting through the silence with newfound fluidity. "His journey isn't just about strength or valor. It's about vulnerability and choice. It's about how each decision shapes who we become." She paused, the gravity of her words echoing in the room. Emily's resolve was fortified by the knowledge that this wasn't merely a theoretical approach. It was about igniting passion and depth in her students. She wanted them to grapple with the complexities of personal identity, much like Achilles did, rather than confining their intellect to surface-level knowledge. In that moment, she felt empowered. She was not just an educator in a rigid system but a pioneer, advocating for a type of learning that resonated at a fundamental human level. As discussions progressed, Emily encountered resistance. "But Emily, what about the curriculum requirements? Will they not feel left behind?" asked another colleague, their voice layered with genuine concern. This moment teetered on the edge, a question that could easily deflate her aspirations. But rather than retreating into defensiveness, Emily embraced it. What if these stories become the vehicle through which they connect with the required standards? Students analyzing the hero's journey can discuss themes that appear throughout literature, including how they manifest in modern texts. We're not straying from the guidelines. We're illuminating them through a different lens. The flicker of understanding began to dance in some eyes, but Emily had to maintain her momentum. The voices of opposition still loomed large like iron bars, unrelenting and sharp. She understood that teaching was as much about navigation as it was about instruction. She needed to empower her colleagues to see the value of her vision rather than merely contesting it. Feeling the swell of her anxiety, Emily took a deliberate breath, channeling it into momentum. This isn't just my idea. It's an opportunity for collaboration. We can design assessments that evaluate critical thinking alongside the required standards. Let us develop a philosophy of literature education that allows for innovation within our framework. Her passion infused her words with energy, and for the first time, a ripple of excitement began to manifest in the room. By reframing the narrative around change and collaboration, Emily felt a transformation within herself. She had shifted from presenting her proposal as an isolated vision to inviting her colleagues into a shared exploration of educational possibilities. This was no longer about defending a solitary idea. It was building a bridge. As the conversation continued, Emily's heart raced at the might of potential unity forming, but she also felt the weighty shadow of doubt resilient within. Would this connection hold? Or would tradition once again overshadow a progressive approach? After the meeting, Emily reflected in the quiet of her classroom, her heart heavy yet hopeful. The journey was far from over. There would be challenges ahead and more battles to fight, but there was also an undeniable spark of change beginning to flicker in the hearts of others. With renewed determination, Emily crafted a plan for the next steps, not just for the curriculum but for her own professional growth. This was her moment of revelation. She could not only advocate for her mission but develop her peers into advocates as well. As she considered her next move, the door creaked open. A fellow teacher stepped in, their expression unreadable but not hostile. "Can we talk?" they asked, the uncertainty hanging between challenge and collaboration. Emily's heart thumped heavily with the promise of confrontation, but this time, she felt ready. What awaited her in that exchange might define the next chapter of her journey, one that could solidify her as a catalyst for transformative change, or one that might push her back into the safe embrace of conformity. Emily gestured for her colleague to sit, her heart racing with both trepidation and anticipation. The tension in the air crackled as she took a seat across from him, the remnants of her earlier confidence now mingling with a heightened sense of vulnerability. She was both anxious and excited at the prospect of what this conversation might unfold. "Thanks for agreeing to chat," her colleague began, leaning forward slightly, his expression softening. "I've been thinking a lot about your presentation and the ideas you brought up. What you proposed is certainly unconventional, and I wondered if you've considered how that might play out in practice." His approach was measured, and rather than sounding accusatory, it felt like an invitation. Emily sensed the opening, a rare opportunity to delve deeper into her vision and clarify her motivations. "I appreciate that," she replied, her voice steadier than it felt. "I'm aware of the challenges, but I believe that engaging students on a more profound level is essential. Greek mythology isn't just ancient text. It's filled with human experience, conflict, and choices that we still grapple with today. It connects to our lives, and that connection is what can ignite their learning." The lines of skepticism began to fade from his face, but Emily sensed the need to bridge the gap between vision and execution. "I get that it's a shift from the norm," she continued, "but what if we created joint sessions? We could introduce a multidisciplinary approach that allows students to engage with the standards effectively through collaborative projects based on these myths." He nodded thoughtfully, though his brow still furrowed. "That sounds promising, but how do you propose we assess students' understanding? Traditional metrics don't always capture the depth of interpretation you're aiming for." The question stung, but Emily did not retreat. Instead, she drew on her earlier reflections about strength through vulnerability. "What if we developed alternative assessments? A project could have them analyze a character's decision as a means to unlock broader themes." Emily paused, searching for a way to make her assertion resonate. "Instead of merely testing their recall, we could ask them to express these themes through creative outlets, arts, digital media, even debate. It's about authentic engagement and showcasing their understanding in various forms." Her colleague's features softened further, The flicker in his eyes spoke of contemplation. A deeper understanding through different mediums. That could work. He leaned back, considering the implications. But change is always met with resistance. Are you ready for that? Emily inhaled sharply, the truth of that statement striking a chord. This was not merely about proposing a new teaching method. It was about confronting entrenched practices, the very foundation upon which many had built their careers. Yet, clarity emerged within her. "I'm committed to making this work," she replied firmly, her resolve hardening. "But I can't do it alone. I need allies like you. Together, we can challenge the mold and pave a new path for our students." He smiled then, a slow understanding dawning. "If I'm on board, I could help present this perspective at the next staff meeting. It would give your voice more weight, and maybe, just maybe, open others to the idea." Gratitude flooded Emily's system, invigorating her spirit. This was more than a cautious acceptance. It felt like the birth of a partnership. She envisioned standing side by side with him, advocating for their shared vision and expansion of ideas that could extend beyond the boundaries they had so often accepted. As they continued to strategize, abandoning the fear of conventionality, Emily felt a tide of hope sweeping through her. She had taken another step toward her goal, reinforcing her determination to transform the educational landscape, not only for herself but for her colleagues and, more importantly, for her students. Yet, as the conversation concluded, a flutter of anxiety danced in her chest. Would her colleagues embrace the shift? Would she face new challenges that would test her resolve? The door opened again, revealing another teacher, the department head, whose presence felt like a moment suspended in time. Emily's heart sank slightly. This was the moment she had both anticipated and dreaded. Would the resistance she had faced before reappear with renewed vigor, or might this conversation turn into a new door opening? Perhaps her journey toward professional growth rested on this very moment. She swept her dry palms against her jeans, preparing herself for what lay ahead, aware that the next few minutes could either galvanize her plans or send her spiraling back into conformity. Emily's breath caught for a fleeting second as the department head walked in, his authoritative presence consuming the small room. This was the man whose nods of approval often dictated the direction of initiatives and whose raised eyebrows could quash innovative proposals. Emily fortified herself with the awareness that she had already begun to forge a path, and this meeting could potentially shape not only her professional journey but also that of her students. "Good afternoon, everyone," he greeted, his voice a blend of familiarity and formality. His steely gaze swept across the small gathering, eventually landing on Emily. "I was just about to discuss the curriculum revisions for next semester. Emily, I hear you've been exploring some unconventional ideas." The way he framed it made her heart race yet again, this time not with trepidation but with a hint of defiance. It was a chance to present her vision. "Yes, I have," she said, leaning forward, her voice steady. "I propose integrating Greek mythology into our curriculum not just for its historical relevance, but as a way to foster deeper engagement with our students. It's not just literature. It's about human experiences that are still prevalent in our society." The department head raised an eyebrow, a slight challenge in his expression. "And how exactly do you plan to assess this understanding? We have certain metrics to uphold, you know. What if the students struggle with these themes?" Emily nearly flinched at the reminder of those metrics but quickly regained her composure. She had anticipated this objection. "This isn't about abandoning assessment," she replied firmly. "It's about redefining it. Imagine instead of standardized tests, we created projects where students express their understanding through various mediums: art, drama, debate. We encourage them to relate these stories to their own lives. It's a more holistic way to evaluate their comprehension." There was a flicker of interest in the department head's eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "You realize that changing how we evaluate students could meet with significant pushback. You'll need more than passion, you'll need data." Data. It always circled back to that. Yet, Emily felt something shifting inside her. This wasn't just about numbers or grades. It was about igniting a flame of curiosity in students. This was a critical moment that could define her trajectory in the institution. Then, perhaps we could pilot a joint session with the teachers from the arts and social studies departments, she suggested, her pulse quickening at the thought. We can gather qualitative data on student engagement and understanding, gather feedback, and adapt as we go. If we communicate this as a cross-curricular initiative, it may lessen resistance. For a moment, silence hung in the air, her heart thudding loudly in her chest. If only she could sense which way he was leaning. The department head stared at her, contemplating. "You're suggesting we take a leap of faith?" Emily's stomach tightened. "Cautious leap, yes. But it's a chance to redefine education in a way that resonates with students today." The challenge stirred something inside her, a desire to show that she could be a catalyst for change. To engage them beyond the textbook, to help them see these myths through their own lens. Can be done if we're willing to work together. For the first time, she noticed a glimmer of curiosity replace some of the resistance in his eyes. Perhaps she would not be battling alone. Perhaps she could make a difference within this institution after all. Before he could respond, her colleague interjected. "I believe in Emily's vision. If we combine our resources and support, we could create something impactful together. This could even improve student outcomes. We owe it to them to explore this." As her colleague spoke, Emily felt a rush of validation wash over her. It felt empowering to have an ally willing to challenge the status quo alongside her. They had recognized a shared purpose, a common thread in the tapestry of their teaching. Philosophy. The department head finally leaned back, contemplating. "All right, I'll consider the pilot program. But be prepared, the faculty will put up a fight. You need to be ready for some hard questions and possibly some harsh criticism." "Let them come," Emily said, her voice filled with newfound resolve. "I won't back down." The conversation had opened a door, though it remained uncertain how wide it would swing. As she left the meeting, anticipation thrummed in her veins. The path ahead was fraught with potential roadblocks, but now she was armed with allies and a strategy. Yet, lurking beneath her resolve was the nagging fear of backlash. Would they genuinely support her, or would she find herself isolated once again? She glanced at the email notification that had just popped up on her phone. Department meeting agenda. The next session would outline whose projects took priority. Would hers be among them? Or would she once again discover that her ideas were relegated to the back burner? Determined, she steadied her breath. The true challenge lay ahead. Acceptance was only the first step. The following days were a whirlwind of preparation for Emily. The impending department meeting loomed over her like a storm cloud, and the thought of pitching her pilot program filled her with both excitement and dread. Each evening, she found herself poring over research, histories, and interpretations of Greek mythology, seeking every angle to present her case compellingly. She wanted to share not just the tales, but their disarming relevance to teenage lives, a well-crafted bridge from ancient wisdom to modern challenges. With every article read and every lesson planned, Emily began to unearth her own motivations. This wasn't merely an academic endeavor. It became intensely personal. She recalled her own struggles as a student, feeling stifled by rigid curricula and standardized expectations. The memory struck like a thunderbolt, compelling her to fight for the opportunity to ignite curiosity in others. She wasn't just advocating for a new program. She was standing up for students like her. The day of the meeting arrived, and Emily's heart raced as she made her way to the conference room. The gathering was larger than usual, and familiar faces filled her with both reassurance and anxiety. Her colleague sat beside her, offering a silent nod of support. As the department head reviewed the agenda, Emily's mind swirled with potential questions and criticisms she might face, but she quelled her doubts with grim determination. Next on the agenda, Ms. Henderson will present her pilot program proposal on integrating Greek mythology into the curriculum, the department head said, his tone suggesting both formality and skepticism. Emily stood, the weight of scrutiny settling on her shoulders. Taking a deep breath, she launched into her presentation. The initial slides outlined the power of storytelling across cultures, leading to an in-depth discussion of Greek myths, tales of heroism, flawed characters, and ethical dilemmas. As she spoke, Emily felt the energy of the room shift. Eyes that had been blank were now attentive, nods of understanding rippling among the staff. But as she described the cross-departmental collaboration and innovative assessment strategies, the weight of the department head's potential disapproval loomed again. Would they accept her vision, or would it be shot down like so many before? The moment crystallized into an internal battle between fear and hope, and Emily knew she had to fortify herself for the challenges ahead. Then, a voice broke through her thoughts. Emily, while your passion is commendable, how do you plan to ensure that this initiative will meet the needs of students who struggle with more conventional learning methods? It was a fellow educator known for her practical approach, and her question landed like a stone in stagnant water. The tension in the room charged the air, and Emily experienced a flash of self-doubt. Was she prepared to defend not just the program, but the very essence of her belief in education's transformative power? Great question, Emily responded, her voice now steady and crisp. That's why the pilot will not only employ diverse projects but will also differentiate instruction. We will include visual aids, peer collaborations, and personalized feedback sessions, ensuring every student finds a connection. From behind her, she felt the support of her colleague as he whispered, "You've got this." Encouraged, Emily continued, her enthusiasm weaving more seamlessly into the fabric of her arguments. As discussions unfolded, she faced questions about feasibility, budget implications, and time requirements. But Emily welcomed each challenge, using them as opportunities to clarify her vision. She noticed the department head's demeanor softening. Curiosity had begun to replace his previous skepticism. When the formal part of the meeting adjourned, Emily felt a cautious optimism. She had navigated the minefield of opinions, had articulated her ideas with clarity, and had pushed through her own self-doubt. The department head's final words echoed in her mind. "Let us keep the dialogue open. I want to see where this leads." Though the meeting ended on a positive note, a new concern loomed. Emily was aware that the hardest battles often came after a glimpse of victory. Would her proposal endure the inevitable resistance from some faculty members, those who preferred the old ways? She stepped out of the meeting, her heart racing with both triumph and anxiety. As she turned the corner, she was met by a colleague whose face bore the weight of skepticism. With arms crossed and a frown forming, he confronted her with unspoken doubts. "Do you really think you can change their minds?" he asked, skepticism dripping from his words. In that moment, she realized her journey was far from over. It had only just begun. If she wished to carry her vision forward, she would have to confront this incredulity directly. And more importantly, she would need to prepare herself for the kind of opposition that tested her resolve. The question lingered in the room, heavy and unrelenting. How far was she willing to go to fight for her students' futures? Emily walked away from the conference room with a swirl of mixed emotions, validation from some, skepticism from others, and a lingering urgency to prove herself. The supportive nods from her allies were overshadowed by her colleague's confrontation, his doubts weighing heavily on her mind. She refused to let their skepticism define her journey. If she wanted to make a lasting impact, she needed to shift their perspectives on education and what it could mean for their students. First, she found herself in the teacher's lounge later that day, surrounded by casual chatter and the scent of freshly brewed coffee. It was a comfortable refuge, yet Emily felt an underlying tension, the sense that her program could be a ripple in a larger pond of stagnation. As she took a sip from her cup, she noticed her colleague, Sarah, seated alone, engrossed in a book. The heaviness in her posture drew Emily in. "Hey, mind if I join?" Emily asked, gesturing to the empty seat across from Sarah. "Sure," Sarah replied, looking up. "Thought you'd be basking in the afterglow of your presentation. I have to admit, I didn't expect it to go as well as it did." Emily hesitated, the words of her doubtful colleague drifting back to her. "Thanks, but I'm still processing everything. There's a lot of pushback behind those compliments. Some of my colleagues have pretty entrenched views on how things should be done." "Yeah, I get that. But change is hard and you're really onto something," Sarah said, her tone encouraging. "And you're passionate about it, which is half the battle." Just remember that it's okay to feel uncertain. Emily leaned forward, her interest piqued. You think so? Sometimes, I feel that by wanting to change things, I'm just digging my own grave. Not at all, Sarah replied, her voice steady. In fact, I think your willingness to confront challenges shows strength. Just think about creating a supportive network. Bring in those who believe in your vision, create allies, advocates. They matter. The idea sparked a fire within Emily. A network. If she could engage others who shared her passion, maybe she could counteract the skeptic's influence. It was a calculated move, and she needed to think strategically about how to garner support while allowing room for constructive discussions with the naysayers. After a few moments filled with silence, Emily decided to act on this newfound inspiration. She would reach out to other teachers, not just in her department but across the school. She wanted to draw parallels between Greek myths and modern issues: bullying, identity crises, and ethical dilemmas. By intertwining their shared experiences with the lessons of the past, maybe she could ignite sparks of interest and support the cause she believed in. As she left the lounge, her mind thrummed with ideas. She could host small group discussions during lunch or after school, where teachers could explore how they could take inspiration from her program. With each interaction, she would create deeper conversations around educational philosophy, ultimately breeding understanding and collaboration. In the days that followed, Emily sent out invitations to casual meetups with her colleagues. Each gathering was an opportunity to share and learn, like how Odysseus' cunning might inform classroom management strategies or how Icarus' hubris could be a lesson in moderation and balance. But even as she forged these connections, doubts began to creep in. Some teachers showed enthusiasm, yet others remained stone-faced, unwilling to budge. The resistance was palpable. During one meeting, she noticed glances of disbelief and dismissive comments in response to her ideas. The disparity between her optimism and their skepticism felt stark, like a chasm that threatened to derail her efforts. In moments alone, Emily would question her drive. Was she deluding herself? Did she have the strength to contend with the entrenched views of those who held power in the department? With each passing day, she tightened her resolve. It became clear this journey was more than a proposal for a new program. It was about reshaping narratives, not just for her students but for herself as well. As she structured her support system, she recognized a core truth. Judgment would come, but resilience would define her path. Just as she felt she was gaining traction, a troubling rumor reached her ears: someone was preparing to completely undermine her proposal at the upcoming department retreat. The threat loomed large, but Emily knew she couldn't back down now. It was time to confront her fears and the person intent on sabotaging her dream. She understood now that the real fight was about to begin. Would she have the courage to face it head-on? The answer would shape her future and the futures of her students. Emily awoke the following morning with a determined sense of purpose, her mind buzzing from the weight of the previous day's revelations. She turned over the challenges swirling in her head, but there was no time for doubt. The impending department retreat loomed like a storm cloud, with whispers of sabotage swirling in the air. She had to prepare, and the first step was acknowledging the urgency of her mission. In the quiet of dawn, she brewed a steaming mug of coffee and settled at her kitchen table, keyboard in hand. Crafting an outline for her presentation became both a tactical exercise and an act of catharsis. She envisioned every slide, considering how to frame her narrative, how to link the ancient myths to modern educational dilemmas, igniting passion rather than resistance. Her heart raced as she typed, shaping powerful connections that she hoped would resonate with even her harshest critics. The day of the retreat arrived, and with it a growing anxiety. Emily adjusted her blouse and smoothed her hair, reminding herself that she wasn't just a teacher. She was an advocate for transformation. She met with a few allies beforehand, sharing snippets of her outline. The enthusiasm in their voices strengthened her resolve. They weren't just rooting for her, they were ready to support her outspokenly. As the retreat commenced, she stepped into the conference room, the air thick with tension. Colleagues milled about, exchanging pleasantries while masking their skepticism under the guise of politeness. Emily noticed Tom, her principal antagonist, standing near the refreshments, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. The sight of him fueled her determination, cutting through the unsettling apprehension. When it was her turn to present, Emily took a deep breath, sensing every watchful gaze in the room. She unleashed her passion, weaving together tales of Greek heroes and the relevance they held in shaping responsible citizens today. As she spoke of perseverance and moral dilemmas, she caught glimmers of intrigue flicker in the eyes of her audience. But when she reached the part addressing potential pitfalls in educational reform, drawing parallels with Icarus and his hubris, she noticed the tightening of Tom's jaw. "It's our responsibility," Emily asserted, "to recognize the fine line between innovation and recklessness. Through guided discussions, we can explore how history serves as our greatest teacher. I invite you, all of you, to question the status quo." Her voice steadied, each word infused with a conviction that surprised even her. The room hummed with an uncertain energy as she concluded. She had delivered a compelling argument, but as the questions began, she could feel Tom's cooling demeanor. His voice emerged, sharp and piercing, synthesizing all the skepticism she had faced. "Emily, while your enthusiasm is commendable, how do you expect these myths to translate into the reality of standardized testing and curriculum mandates?" That question struck like a blade. Doubts rose within her, moments of hesitance creeping back. Yet, she realized this was a defining moment. Instead of retreating into defensiveness, she took deliberate breaths and locked eyes with Tom. "What if we viewed standardized tests not as barriers, but as metrics that can evolve to encompass holistic education? Learning ISNTA test score. It's a journey, and I believe we can reshape that journey together." The surrounding murmurs grew louder, her colleagues engaging in quiet discussions, weighing her words. Emily felt the current of the room shift. Seeds of curiosity had been planted, yet she knew another confrontation with a resistant colleague awaited her. After the session, as attendees filtered out, she approached Sarah. "Did you see it?" Some seemed on board, but then Emily trailed off, concern tightening her chest. Sarah's nod offered reassurance. "This is just the beginning, Emily. You're breaking ground. Just remember, with every step you take, you'll face resistance. But constant dialogue will shift perspectives." A flicker of hope ignited within her as she ventured into further conversations. Perhaps her resilience was startling. Perhaps it was time for another, more direct conversation, this time with Tom, beyond the public eye. She wouldn't let unresolved tension dictate her path. As Emily plotted her next move, she thought of the confrontation that lay ahead. It was clear now. She needed to dismantle any lingering doubts head-on. Would she find the courage to confront Tom, to challenge his doubts and beliefs? Her journey towards transformative education was about to accelerate with urgency. Failure was not an option, not for her and certainly not for her students. Emily stood resolute in her classroom, a sense of triumph washing over her as she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this defining moment. Months of struggle and self-doubt had culminated in the successful pilot of the Greek mythology curriculum she had envisioned. The initial skepticism that had confronted her now seemed distant, transformed into enthusiasm as she witnessed her students igniting a newfound love for learning. Each day, the classroom buzzed with creative energy as students wrote their own myths, collaborated on projects that bridged art and literature, and engaged in spirited discussions about the characters and their moral dilemmas. Emily had succeeded in turning fear into exhilaration not only for herself but for her peers and her students. She had proven that education could be a transformative journey rather than a series of standardized hurdles. Her growth, however, had not been just professional. It was deeply personal as well. Emily had learned to confront her fears, to advocate for her vision, and to cultivate an environment where both teaching and learning thrived. It was a significant shift. She had transitioned from a passive observer of the educational landscape to an active participant in shaping its future. She embraced her leadership role, generating enthusiasm throughout the teacher community, where once there had been resistance. Feedback from her colleagues confirmed her transformation. "I see how much this means to you, Emily," Sarah commented during a recent faculty lunch, a smile spreading across her face. "Your passion is contagious, and it's changed the way we think about engaging with our students." Emily could see her colleagues beginning to reconsider their approaches to education, drawing inspiration from her willingness to innovate. That pivotal day when she had faced her doubts and petitioned for change was now a cornerstone in Emily's narrative. Surrounded by a supportive network of allies, she tackled not just the curricular revisions, but the fear of standing alone against the tide of skepticism. With every triumph, she built not only her confidence but a community that heeded the call for courage in reimagining education. One morning, during a student showcase of their myth-inspired projects, Emily stood proudly as her students presented. Each narrative they crafted bore the weight of empathy, courage, and reflection, mirroring the virtues of the ancient stories she had grown to love. The culmination of their efforts echoed the lessons she had learned through their journeys. True education ignites curiosity and spurs open conversation, stretching beyond one's comfort zone. As applause filled the room, Emily's heart swelled with pride, gratitude woven in each heartbeat. "You all did fantastically," she exclaimed, her voice full of warmth. "You captured the essence of these heroes and made them your own." The smiles of her students reflected the joy of discovery, a testament to how far they had come together. In that moment, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email containing her official recognition as a teacher of excellence from the district, an acknowledgement of the impact she had made. She gazed at the words and felt a rush of accomplishment. Validation had come, confirming her choice to fight against the norm. She had transcended fear, guiding her students into a world where education was not merely about passing exams, but embracing narratives that shaped their very existence. The sense of fulfillment that enveloped her felt deeply earned. She had attained not only professional recognition but, more importantly, personal growth. She was no longer merely Emily the teacher. She had become Emily the changemaker. As the semester progressed, Emily continued to advocate for innovative teaching methods, collaborating with other departments to integrate storytelling across the curriculum. Soon, her initiatives blossomed into a mini-revolution, reshaping the educational landscape within her school, a legacy of courage and creativity that would extend far beyond her classroom. With a spirit anew, she reflected on the entire journey from the frightened educator uncertain of her path to the confident leader shaping the narrative for future generations. Emily stood at the intersection of past and future, where myth and reality collided, ready to pave the way for others. With the echoes of her students' laughter and their stories embedded in her heart, she knew this was only the beginning of an enduring legacy inspired by the very tales that had shaped her own life. Now, it is your turn to support this journey. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that illustrate profound transformations. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and strengthen this community of personal growth. Comment your reactions and theories about the journey you just witnessed. Your voice matters. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to spread the message of overcoming challenges and pursuing dreams.